Welcome to Create More Intimacy, a podcast for men. I'm Elisa Stoddard, and I help successful men stop chasing sex and start building real connection so they finally feel close, connected, and wanted again. There's a particular kind of tired that comes from trying so hard to be different and still watching her pull away. You've been doing all the things. You've been checking in more, softening your tone, asking how she's feeling instead of assuming you already know. You've been watchful of yourself in ways you never used to be. And some small part of you keeps waiting for her to notice, to relax, to look at you the way she used to. Instead, she seems distant in a way that almost feels worse than before. Not angry, not cold exactly, just unmoved. And underneath your effort, a question you don't say out loud starts to form. What else does she want from me? If you're in this place right now, I want you to hear something that might be uncomfortable at first, but will make sense by the end of this episode. The eagerness itself might be the problem. Not because your intentions are wrong, not because you don't mean it, but because of what that eagerness is quietly asking her to do, and because of what it's quietly asking of you. Welcome to episode 66. You changed to keep her. That's the problem. Most men in this position believe they're doing exactly what's required. They were told, directly or indirectly, that they needed to shift. And they went and did it. They apologized. They adjusted. They started paying closer attention. What they don't expect is that doing the right things can still fail to move her. Because there are two different reasons a man changes. And from the outside, they look exactly the same. One reason is this. He has decided this is the kind of partner he wants to be, not to earn anything, not to avoid a consequence, just because he no longer wants to be the version of himself that got them there. The other reason is this. He is changing to keep her, to avoid losing her, to become worthy enough, safe enough, good enough that she stays. Same actions, same words, same visible effort, but not at all the same thing. And the difference eventually surfaces, usually as resentment. And here's how it shows up. If he's changing to keep her, some part of him is waiting for a return on his investment. He needs her to notice, to soften, to come back to him in some recognizable way, or the change starts to feel like it isn't working. When that return doesn't come fast enough, or doesn't come in the way that he pictured it, resentment starts to build quietly underneath all the good behavior. He's still doing the right things on the surface. Internally, he's keeping score. One of the men I worked with described the exhaustion of this directly. I do everything for her so she can be happy, and I get no connection back. Notice the shape of that sentence. Everything he's doing is aimed at her happiness, in exchange for something he expects to receive. That is not partnership. That is a transaction he hasn't said out loud, not even to himself. This is the first thing worth sitting with honestly. Are you becoming different because you've decided you want to be? Or are you becoming different because you're afraid of what happens if you don't? Proving requires an audience. Becoming different does not. This distinction explains why so much sincere effort still fails to restore intimacy. A man can be doing all the right things and still be operating from the same underlying need he had before. The need to be told he's good, he's safe, he's finally passed the test. When change is still tethered to her approval, it isn't actually his yet. It's still her labor. She has to notice it, register it, respond to it, and eventually validate it, or the whole effort feels incomplete to him. That is an enormous amount of emotional work to hand to someone who is already exhausted. Becoming different looks quieter from the outside. It doesn't announce itself. A man who has actually changed isn't checking her face after every attempt to see if he passed. He's not narrating his own growth. He's just being the person he decided to become, whether or not she's watching in that particular moment. This is difficult to hear because it can feel like the eager version is the more devoted one. He's the one working hardest, asking the most, showing the most visible effort. But visible effort aimed at her approval isn't devotion. It's dependence wearing a costume as devotion. I explain this to clients using an idea that tends to land harder than most reframes that I offer. A mother can have an intensely close bond with her child and feel absolutely no desire to have sex with that child. That's not a flaw in the bond. That is the bond working exactly as it should. If a man behaves like one of her children, by design, that kills intimacy. Not because she's punishing him, because her body is responding correctly to the role he has put her in. When a man needs constant reassurance that he's doing this right, when he checks in anxiously, when he needs her to confirm his progress before he can trust it himself, he is asking her to parent him through his own change. He may not see it that way. From his side, it feels like communication and it feels like accountability, like exactly what he was told to do, to stay engaged, keep checking in, don't go silent again. But from where she's standing, she is now responsible for monitoring someone else's emotional homework, just to track whether he's actually different or just performing different, just to soothe his anxiety about whether he's safe to trust again. She has to be the one who says, yes, that was good, keep going. I worked with a man who, 3 months into visible effort, still asked his wife most nights whether she'd noticed him trying. At first, she answered warmly. By the 6th or 7th week, though, her answers got shorter. He read that as her giving up on him. What was actually happening was that she had become tired in a specific way, the way a parent gets tired of a child who needs constant reassurance that they're being good. She wasn't losing faith in his ability to change. She was losing the capacity to keep grading it. And that's not partnership, that's caretaking. Caretaking, no matter how loving, does not coexist equally with desire. This is often the part that confuses men the most because it isn't logical in the way they're used to solving problems. Her mind might genuinely want to move forward. She might believe he's trying. She might even tell him she can see the changes in him, and still her body won't follow. This isn't her being difficult or withholding on purpose. Desire doesn't operate on the same track as belief. You can believe someone is safe and still not feel pulled toward them, especially if part of you has been cast into a management role. A woman who has spent months or years monitoring a man's moods, his follow-through, his consistency, is not primed for desire toward the person she's monitoring. Vigilance and arousal are asking 2 different nervous systems to do 2 different jobs, and they don't share resources well. The more she has to watch him, assess him, and reassure him, the more her body settles into a caretaking posture that has nothing sexual available in it. I think of a woman I heard about secondhand through a client's own account of their marriage. She had told him plainly that she wanted things to be different between them, and she meant it. But every time he asked her, gently, whether she'd noticed his effort, something in her would grow quiet. Not because she doubted him, because the asking itself put her back in the seat of evaluator, and evaluators don't get to also be the ones who feel swept up. This is why some men experience the most painful version of this pattern. They finally start doing the right things, And instead of feeling closer to their wife, they feel further away, because the doing itself put her back into the role that made the distance in the first place. One man described the exhaustion of this cycle honestly. I feel like I have to prove and earn it, but I keep failing. What he didn't yet see was that the proving itself, not the failing, was the thing keeping him stuck. Here's the part that most men skip because it's less satisfying than an action plan. I call this you gotta wanna. Not gotta perform, not gotta prove, gotta actually want it from somewhere inside himself that doesn't require her sign off. Her job never was to make you feel loved, worthy, or appreciated. That was never something she owed you. It isn't something she can actually give you in a way that sticks, even if she tried with everything she had. Being told you're worthy by someone else doesn't build worth. It builds dependency on being told that you're worth something. Your actual work is building a relationship with yourself where you don't need her verdict to know who you are. Self-trust, self-support, providing yourself the safety you've quietly been asking her to provide instead. This is uncomfortable because it removes the thing that made the anxious version feel productive. Checking in gave him something to do with his anxiety. Sitting in the not knowing gives him nothing to do except stay steady anyway and trust himself enough to do that. But this is exactly what shifts the dynamic. When a man stops needing her to certify his growth, he stops asking her to parent him. He starts occupying his own adulthood instead of borrowing hers. And a woman who is no longer managing someone else's emotional process has room for the first time in a long time to notice him as a man instead of a project. This doesn't mean go silent or stop communicating or disappear into some stoic self-improvement process. It means the communication changes in nature. He's not saying, "Tell me I'm doing okay." He's saying, "Here's who I am now," and letting that statement exist without requiring her response to accept it and to make it true. And it means checking your own motive honestly. Are you doing this because it's who you want to be? Or because you're afraid of what happens if you don't? Those two questions produce different men, even when they produce the same behavior for a while. Only one of them holds up when she doesn't respond the way you'd hoped. If you've been listening to this and recognize the pattern in yourself, I want to be honest with you about something. This isn't a small adjustment. I see that. It's a fundamentally different relationship with your own effort and with yourself. Where have you been changing to keep her instead of changing because it's who you've decided to be? Where have you been asking her to confirm your progress instead of trusting it yourself? Where has your eagerness been less about her and more about needing to know you're safe from her judgment? You don't need her to grade this. You need to become someone who doesn't require the grade to know who he is. If you want help understanding what this actually looks like in your specific marriage, not in theory, but in particular ways you've been asking her to hold your growth for you, I invite you to book a 30-minute relationship clarity call, and you can do that at the link in the bio or at elisastoddard.com. We'll look at your situation honestly, what's happening, what's possible, where your blind spots are, and whether it makes sense to work together. And if you want a deeper look at this before you ever get on a call, I'm hosting a free training on August 4th at 2 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Mountain, 4 p.m. Central, and 5 p.m. Eastern, where I'll go further into exactly what this shift looks like in practice. You can save your spot using the link in the bio or at elisastoddard.com, where you can register for the webinar. Have a great week. We'll see you next time. Thanks for being here. If something in this episode hit home, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. It helps more men find the support they need. And if you are ready to get help or take the next step, you'll find the link to book a free call in the show notes. I'll see you next time.